Welcome to QueerStory, where we uncover the hidden and often tragic histories of queer figures who shape the world. Today we tell the story of Oscar Wilde, a man whose sharp wit, flamboyant style, and brilliant mind made him one of the most celebrated writers of his time. Wilde's life was a grand performance, a spectacle of genius and excess. He charmed Victorian society, dazzled audiences with his words, and lived by the philosophy that art should exist for its own sake. But in a cruel twist, the very society that adored him also destroyed him. His love for another man was his undoing, and his downfall was as dramatic as any of his plays. Wilde's story is one of triumph and tragedy, beauty and betrayal, love and loss. His suffering was immense, but his legacy is eternal. Let's step into the world of Oscar Wilde, the man who lived and died for art, love, and truth. Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde was born on October 16, 1854, in Dublin, Ireland, into an upper-class, intellectually rich family. His father, Sir William Wilde, was the renowned surgeon and an expert in Irish folklore, while his mother, Jane Wilde, was a fiery nationalist and poet who wrote under the pen name Speranza. From an early age, Wilde was immersed in literature, storytelling, and political discourse, all of which shaped his brilliant and rebellious mind. He attended Trinity College, Dublin, where he excelled in the classics, winning the prestigious Berkeley Gold Medal for his academic achievements. But it was at Oxford University, where he studied from 1874 to 1878, that Wilde truly flourished. He became known for his sharp wit, flamboyant fashion, and devotion to the aesthetic movement, a philosophy that championed beauty over practicality. Wilde famously declared, "I find it harder and harder every day to live up to my blue china." At Oxford, he absorbed the ideas of John Ruskin and Walter Pater, two influential thinkers who argued that life itself should be a work of art. Wilde took this to heart, not just in his writing, but in his entire persona. He grew out his hair, adorned himself in velvet coats and silk scarves, and cultivated a reputation as a provocateur. He was ridiculed by some but adored by others. After graduating, Wilde moved to London, where he became a leading figure in the city's literary and social circles. His lectures on aestheticism took him across Britain, and even to America, in 1882, where he was both mocked and mesmerized by audiences. When he arrived in New York, he famously told customs officers, "I have nothing to declare but my genius." His wit made him an instant celebrity, and soon he was mingling with the artistic elite, including James Whistler, Aubrey Beardsley, and Lily Langtry. By the late 1880s, Wilde had established himself as a serious writer. His only novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, 1890, shocked readers with its dark themes of vanity, hedonism, and queerness. Though critics attacked it as immoral, Wilde defended it fiercely, stating, "There is no such thing as a moral or an immoral book. Books are well written or badly written. That is all." His fame grew with his plays. Lady Windermere's Fan, 1892, A Woman of No Importance, 1893, and An Ideal Husband, 1895. But his greatest triumph was The Importance of Being Earnest, 1895. A sharp, satirical comedy that mocked Victorian society. Wilde was at the height of his career. He was celebrated, wealthy, and admired. But behind the scenes, he was living a dangerous double life. In 1891, Wilde met Lord Alfred Bosie Douglas, a charming but reckless young aristocrat. The two quickly became inseparable. Their relationship was passionate, intense, and doomed from the start. Bosie was spoiled and impulsive, with a deep hatred for his father, John Sholto Douglas, the Marquis of Queensberry. The Marquis was a violent, homophobic man who became obsessed with exposing Wilde's immorality. For years, Wilde and Bosie indulged in a lavish lifestyle, hosting extravagant parties and frequenting male brothels. Their love affair was an open secret, but in Victorian England, homosexuality was a criminal offence. In February 1895, the Marquess left a calling card at Wilde's club, accusing him of being a posing sodomite. Bosie, blinded by rage, convinced Wilde to sue his father for libel. It was the worst decision of Wilde's life. Queensberry fought back viciously. His lawyers presented evidence of Wilde's relationships with young men, exposing intimate letters and testimonies. Wilde lost the libel case, but worse, the revelations led to his arrest for gross indecency on April 6, 1895. His trial became a public spectacle. The same society that had once adored Wilde now turned on him. His own words, his letters, his witticisms, even passages from Dorian Gray, were used as evidence against him. On May 25, 1895, Wilde was found guilty and sentenced to 2 years of hard labor. His name was erased from London's literary circles. His plays were shut down. His friends abandoned him. His wife, Constance, took their children and fled to Switzerland. Oscar Wilde, once the toast of London, was now a condemned man. Prison broke Wilde. At Reading Jail, he suffered starvation, illness, and brutal physical labor. The man who once lived for beauty and art was now subjected to a life of filth and cruelty. It was in prison that he wrote De Profundis, a long, heart-wrenching letter to Bosie, reflecting on their love and the pain it had caused him. Wilde wrote, "I must learn to love the darkness of life." Upon his release in 1897, he was a ruined man. He fled to France, changing his name to Sebastian Melmoth. He and Bosie briefly reunited, but their love had turned to resentment. Wilde lived in poverty, his health failing. In 1898, he published The Ballad of Reading Jail, a haunting poem about the brutality of prison. It was his final masterpiece. On November 30th, 1900, at age 46, Wilde died in a cheap Paris hotel from meningitis, brought on by untreated syphilis. His last words? "My wallpaper and I are fighting a duel to the death. One or the other of us has to go." Even at the end, his wit remained. Wilde died disgraced, but history would vindicate him. Over time, his work was rediscovered and celebrated. Today, he is a queer icon. His grave in Père Lachaise Cemetery, covered in lipstick kisses from admirers. His words live on, his wit immortal. In 2017, over a century after his conviction, the British government formally pardoned Wilde, and other men criminalized for their sexuality. But Wilde never needed a pardon. His life was proof that art, beauty, and love endure, even in the face of injustice. We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. And Wilde, he was always looking at the stars. That's it for today's episode of Queer Story. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the life of Oscar Wilde, be sure to subscribe, share, and let us know which queer historical figure we should cover next. Until next time, remember, history is queer story. It always has been.
I'ma do what I want, when I want.